May 26, 2020 Select Board meeting. I have this stuff to read. As a preliminary matter, I'm the chair of the Grafton Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. So we have Ed Prisby.
Here.
Peter Carlson.
Peter's here.
Doreen DeFazio.
Doreen DeFazio here.
Donna Stock.
Donna Stock here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tim McInerney.
McInerney here.
Rebecca Meekins.
Becca's here.
Yeah, I guess I'll call Candy at this point too, because she's staff. Candy LaValle.
Hi, I'm here.
Candy, you're a little hard to hear, so I don't know if your mic is down or your speaker's down.
I'm on a laptop today, so.
Oh, okay, I can hear you better now. Thank you. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Ray Mead.
Ray's here.
Chief Crapo.
Chief Crapo's here.
Great. Good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. For this meeting of the Select Board, we are convening by Zoom, and it's posted on the town's website, identifying on the agenda how you can join. For Zoom meetings, please note that the meetings are being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will take questions from the members. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If you want to engage with each other, please do so through me. And then I will try to use the Q&A if there are questions from people watching at home. And each vote will be taken by roll call. So that is that. This is an amended agenda. This is an extra meeting that we were not scheduled to have originally, but based on last week, we do have now. So that's a very short agenda, just very specific things we're going to talk about, but one thing that was added is our first order of new business. Vote to allow restaurants currently holding a liquor license to provide outside consumption of alcoholic beverages subjects to the police department approval. So Tim, did you want to go through how we got here?
Yeah, just briefly, with the new opening orders for restaurants, and we know that some of our revenue is tied to meals tax, we were trying to remove an impediment for the 9 restaurants that are currently in town that have liquor license. If they were or wanted to make modifications to their operation to serve outside, to serve food outside, we'd also want to have that latitude for them to serve alcoholic beverages outside, subject to the approval that you just mentioned from the police department. This in no way trumps, for lack of better words, the ZBA or planning approvals that are in place for those businesses. So if they had special permits or modifications or ZBA criteria that they had to meet for their site plan approval, they would still have to go through that process. I was just putting this up as an opportunity to remove at least one of those regulatory hurdles to allow them, if they were to make modifications, to just not have to make another application to us and have you have a hearing on it. I talked to the ABCC on Friday about this. This isn't new for them. They fully understand and fully agree that it's a local issue because it's a temporary thing up until November 1st, where you can make modifications to applicants' licenses as you see fit. So we thought that, instead of having an applicant getting an idea, getting a plan together, whether they need approval from other departments or not, just like I said, doesn't solve that, but at least it solves this hurdle for them to come back to the board with some control. And we know that Norm Crapo is pretty emphatic about public safety and alcohol consumption. So I figure he was the best gatekeeper in that scenario, but not hindering a restaurant if they wanted to change or modify their premises to consumption outside. We do anticipate, since they're food establishments, they would still consume food when they ordered beverage. You just wouldn't have a drinking bar outside of a restaurant. We assume that there would be food and beverage. But again, it just removes one hurdle and you have the authority to do that. So I thought I'd bring it to you. I think it's and also been a discussed matter with EDC and local businesses in town through John Allen, and Doreen should echo that, I would think, relative to their meetings for EDC to help businesses get back in and get them up and running. But that's really it. I can answer any questions if the board likes.
Does the board have any questions for Tim or Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you for that explanation. So right now, what we're doing is we're allowing restaurants that currently hold a liquor license to allow consumption of beverages on the premise or on the property. But we're not allowing them to consume food on the property. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, food and beverage would be consumed at the same.
Okay, so do we have a special permit process in today? I just want to, my understanding, I'll approve this. I just want to know my own understanding, Tim. Do we have a process in which we approve restaurants to serve outside, like on the front patio of some of them and the side patios and stuff like that? Are these for those restaurants that don't have those already established, I guess is what I'm asking.
No, this is for existing license holders. If they were to modify their space, they would have to come to the board for approval.
I see. Okay, thank you. I understand. Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions? Doreen?
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, through you, I have just a question or a comment for Chief Crapo. So these 9 establishments, once obviously they're subject to your approval or the police department approval, is there a way through these 9 establishments? I know you and Tim communicate a lot, but it'd be nice for the board to have an ongoing list of what establishments are participating in this, not just making the assumption that all are. So once approval is met through you and your department, if you can just keep the board through Tim updated on what establishments those are, that would be great.
I would expect that they would contact your office right away, because you are basically the liquor commissioners. So all I'd be looking at, if you read my memo, would be just basically that they have the containment, they have monitoring, and they are following the rules basically to keep the dining area separate from the parking lot and the street. So that's not an issue. I didn't get anything else to say what 9 establishments are looking to do this. And, naturally, we don't want to, step on anybody that can try to make up some of the losses they had because of this whole COVID-19 pandemic. By the same token, though, we want to just make sure it's done safely, and so that people that don't have any business getting alcoholic beverages can grab something and leave the premises. So, but anything like that, I would assume if they're going to be doing it, that they would be applying, if you want to call it applying, to the select board's office to request the permission to do that.
Just pragmatically, Madam Chair, if I could, what I would propose, if you guys vote in the affirmative, the 9 restaurants that have licenses now, we would just send them a letter saying that you took this vote today. And if they want to move forward, obviously, if there's other regulatory things that are outside of the purview of the select board, they need to follow those things because we don't control those items. But to reach directly out to the chief if they want to modify those things, it saved them a step of coming here than me sending them down there anyway. So we'll send a letter with contact information so they can move straight forward if they so choose.
That sounds good. I just wanted to confirm there was some sort of process with that, so we're all on the same page. Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions or,
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank
Peter?
you. Through you, Madam Chair. Chief, did you say you sent a memo with regards to this? I don't recall seeing one, and I don't know if maybe I might have missed it, but did anyone else get a memo from the chief?
Should have been in the packet. That would have listed out what the chief was calling for in terms of his 4 points. So we can check with Duncan to see if we didn't send it along. I thought we did, but if we didn't, I can pull it up and share the screen if you want. Chief, you emailed me that document, correct?
Yes, I did. And I did look at the packet, whether it was sent to the whole board, but it was in there. It's an email. It's not a per se memo. If you'd like, I can go over it for you if that's easier to quicken your decision this evening.
Just refer to a memo. I just say it refers to a memo that I haven't seen. That's all. I mean, I'm okay with this. I just need to see it at some point.
well, there is a memo in the packet. There's one dated May 22nd
From Tim.
from Tim.
Yeah, and I basically just took whatever the chief told me and put it into that memo. I'm pretty sure of it.
All right, I see. Okay.
So basically what we have is what the chief had sent to staff. But Chief, if you want to just go through it real quick, that'd be great.
I'm sorry, you want me to go over it real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Basically, Tim had asked about, this situation here, looking to see if we couldn't do outside serving. So I sent him a memo. Originally, I sent it to him on the 21st. Police Department has no objections to the proposals for an outdoor dining area with the following conditions. The tent patio or outside area is sufficiently contained so that there is only one entrance or exit, subject to building and fire code naturally. So patrons cannot leave the premises with alcoholic beverages unless wine or malt beverages in original sealed containers sold with food as per ABCC regulations. Containment may include tent walls, temporary permanent or permanent fencing, barricades, potted shrubbery, or some other form of barrier to separate and delineate the outdoor dining area from the parking lot or the street. And management shall provide constant monitoring of the outside dining area to ensure patrons do not leave the premises with alcoholic beverages except as specified in item 2.
Okay. Thank you. We do have a request. I had spoken to a restaurant owner, Steve Belfiore, earlier this week, and he had sent us all a memo. And Becca, can you just let him come on real quick? He just has something to say.
Yep, he's coming. Up there.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You had a couple questions?
Yeah, I just have a question. So thanks for letting me join. I mean, I've been, I think, to one select board meeting before. I think it was to get my liquor license a few years ago. But two questions. Obviously, most of you have seen my email for help on getting a tent. I've figured that out. Process is process. But as far as the approval, so I just want to make sure I understand, because I have a meeting scheduled for the tent. So what we're planning to do is put a 30 by 30 tent in the right side of my parking lot. And what we're going to do is, we're not going to gain anything out of it. We're going to make up for the loss of what we have to take from inside and put those tables and chairs outside. So we will still be whole. I'm not going to go up in capacity. However, we need to be able to sell liquor in that tent in the parking lot. So I thought I heard Chief say not in a parking lot, but I just want to make sure I'm clear on, as long as it's approved through the special permit process through the ZBA for the tent, that we would be allowed to sell alcohol at tables under the tent in the parking lot.
Chief?
Yeah, you're gonna have a tent. That tent's gotta be cordoned off somehow, so people can't just walk in from any location. You're gonna have to have it blocked off somehow. I don't want this just out in the parking lot. People need to be able to walk in through one entrance and leave through that entrance, once again, subject to zoning and fire codes. And it's gonna have to be monitored by the staff.
Okay.
So
Yep.
it's not, you just can't put tables out in the parking lot and start letting people dining and serving.
Correct.
There's no control over that.
Yep, the tent will have sides except for one entrance.
Once again, I suggest you talk to the building inspector just to make sure. I think you have to take a different size tents. You might need a permit for that, unless all that regulation has been suspended right now. But that's all I'm looking for. We're not trying to make it difficult, but we just want to make sure that people aren't leaving willy-nilly with alcoholic beverages. I'm
Okay.
sure you don't want that either, because you're responsible for anything that happens afterwards.
Correct. Yep. And then, so the second part of is, so for approval, do we reach out to the police chief or do we reach out to Doreen? Because I heard both.
No,
With the alcohol.
sorry, Jen, just right to the chief with the plan. Pretty much what you submitted to ZBA, I would just you got to tell them the same thing and tell the chief.
Okay.
So I would just contact him directly.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Doreen, did I see your hand go up? No, okay. Do I have a motion? Is
Madam Chair.
anybody? Oh, yep.
Yeah, my vote to allow restaurants currently holding a liquor license to provide outside consumption of alcohol beverage subject to police department approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. The motion is carried. All right, thanks, Chief.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night. Thank you, Steve.
All right. Sorry, I'm getting back to my agenda. Okay, next on the agenda is, again, the discussion on special and annual town meeting. So I apologize last week. Again, I was on and I was off. So my understanding is we're having this meeting for this main purpose to talk about town meeting. So I just, somebody want to start or you want?
Well, Ray, just by way of the meeting, I think the board was clear in trying to find out some logistical information about holding town meeting on the 20th of June. So Ray and I met Friday, and Ray's going to talk. I'm just going to give you some baseline overview, and then we can get into logistic discussions. So Ray, I know we talked by text today, Ray and I, but I'll just cover some brief stuff and then Ray can jump in with some details. So we met Friday. We talked about having it on the field we knew there were some logistical pieces that we needed some input from a media event type company, which we met with them today on site. So the two logistical things that the board, if it's so inclined, after it goes through this whole discussion with Ray, is changing the date, the time of day for the meeting. Originally we had 10 a.m., but because of the weather and the heat and so forth, Ray thought it was better to move that time up to 8 a.m. But we talked about logistics in terms of getting people there, like CERT people, to help coordinate and kind of train and roll out how we're going to move people around the site. I think we agreed on 9 a.m. start as opposed to 10 and as opposed to 8. So 9 a.m. And then we talked about a rain date for the following day, which is the 21st. So a couple pieces fell into place today. We're getting a number from a logistics group that can do staging and set up chairs and make sure we can have broadcasting out to the world, basically. And then we're trying to look into an FM modulator as well. So people that want to sit in the parking lots, they don't want to come in for whatever reason, COVID-19 probably, they'll be able to listen and then come in when they so choose. So it's a little pivot from where we were before. We think we can use the field with about 500 chairs. We'll have a stage set up with some tenting, but not massive tents, not circus tents, just to provide some shade. And then we'll have about 178 seats with social distancing guidelines being met inside the gym for those who are adverse to being on the field and sitting on the field. So we'd have the plan is right now, about 500 chairs. We can fit more, 500 chairs on the field and about 170 inside the gym. We would register people as they come in right behind the the basketball courts, right next to the gym wall. Wristbands to identify voters that the voters will have to put on themselves because of COVID-19 again. So there's a lot of wrapped in logistics here. Broadcasting and presentation is the main reason why we have to have an event coordinating company come out and talk to us and give us a price to put screens up and to make sure we can broadcast clearly back into the gym. Incidentally, that same company was on site today to meet with the principal and Tony LeMay to talk about high school graduation, which is happening when it's allowed in July. I think July 19th is the date for them. It's a Sunday. So they're going to use the same folks. Unfortunately, we're a month apart as it stands right now. So there's, masks, wristbands. We won't use clickers. There's a lot of logistics around parking. And if there's a ballot vote called by the body. So we're working on those logistics as we go, but I want to at least give you the kind of a broad brush, and then I think Ray can probably take you through some of the logistics with the meeting. So if Ray wants to talk, I'll be quiet.
Sure. So as Tim said, we met on Friday and went through this, and then over the weekend, myself and a couple other people put together a document that really explains everything that's going to go on. So as far as accommodations go, the primary venue of the town meeting will be the football field. People can bring umbrellas for sun protection, but they must sit in the back row or they must sit in the bleachers, which are readily available right there. Something you probably never thought you'd hear from me. Children will be allowed on the football field, but they have to stay with their parents. People who can't participate from the field because of valid reasons such as mobility issues will be seated in the high school gym. The gym will have a moderator, a TV monitor, and a microphone for questions. The town meeting will be broadcast live on cable and FM radio, allowing the proceedings to be followed remotely, homes or cars in the parking lot. Registration, as Tim said, all residents will receive a wristband at the time of registration. Now, on the side of the gym between the basketball court and the gym, there are a bunch of, there's a grass area, there's a sidewalk area, and then there's an area that has, looks like a bike racks. Perfect for people keeping people away from the election workers registering. So you need to stay on the sidewalk. You don't have to get it anywhere near them, anywhere close. You will receive a wristband, which we won't divulge the color of the wristband until that day. You'll receive a wristband and you'll only have to register once. So if somebody calls for a ballot vote, normally we go through the process of re-registering and then putting the ballot vote. As long as you have that wristband on, you have registered and that's it. Registrants, they don't, if you register to vote, you do not have to go to the gym or the field. They can choose to stay in their vehicles, but only people in the gym or the field can participate in hand count and standing votes. The proceedings will follow a normal town meeting. There'll be nothing different other than we will not have clickers. We'll go back to hand counts and standing counts. The registrants may choose to stay in their vehicles, but only people in the gym or the field can, oh, I already went through that. Sorry. The warrant will be organized so that the warrant articles where we expect high interest will follow the budget article. Voting on articles will be hand count, standing count, or ballot. Ballot voting in the field area and gym will follow the standard procedure, except that there will be no need to check in or register before casting a vote. Workers will only need to check for the presence of a wristband. Accommodations will be made for walk-up balloting in the gym. People who only want to vote on certain articles can park in the parking lot, but must be registered and banded before voting. We'll need handouts, flyers, changeable message signs, a site plan or a Google map picture of the high school actually showing where you park, how you get in, hang on, where you park, how you get in, where the high school, where the football field is, where the gym entrance is. There's only going to be one entrance to the gym, and it's going to be on the back side of the gym. So you can't go through the school to get into the gym. That's going to be the way out. Let's see. My handouts, jumbotrons and sound systems. That's what Tim talked about today. Communications of the plan will be posted at Town Hall, Town website, Grafton News, Facelift, and all the other social stuff that's out there. The field spaces will be clearly marked out large enough to allow family members to sit together. Chairs will be provided. No one will be allowed to bring their own chairs, and attendees would be encouraged to bring their own water. So the big change here, the big difference is that we're only going to register once, and everybody gets a wristband. And that's it. Other than that, it's going to be a regular town meeting other than being outside. As Tim said, we're going to have tents. We'll probably on the stage, which will be at the 50-yard line across the field. The Board of Selectmen will be on the stage. Myself, Ginny, Tim, and Becca, and Candy, and that's it. No one else on the stage. We'll have 10 by 20 tents on the stage or whatever, so that we're not sitting out there in the sun the whole time or the rain. And that's.
Wait, let me interrupt you, Ray. Town council will be on the stage. As well.
Yeah, Ginny too. Yeah, and that'll be it. So a lot of thought went into this, and I think it's going to work. We're not going to walk away. We're not going to walk through this and have it perfect, but I think this is the best way it's going to work. The seats will be placed in a semicircle around the stage, and as Tim said, we'll have 500. We can add more, and we'll have 178 seats in the gym. But what we've done in this situation is we've accommodated everybody who wants to sit there and go through town meeting as they would normally do it, either in the gym or on the field. And we've also accounted for people who want to drive up, vote, and leave. I'm done.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Donna?
Just a couple questions. Thank you for the due diligence you spent over just the past week to get something in place that would accommodate all of the concerns, because we have heard some things and I think you've addressed them all. I'm wondering whether or not pop-up tents, those 8x8 tents, people can put those up or not. Just a consideration. And then I'm curious about the communication to our voters, registered voters. How are we going to communicate all of this? Can we do a mailing? We can't rely just on social media and websites to do this.
I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with pop-up tents, but they're going to be way outside, you know, the area of the chairs. So that's why I said if somebody wanted to bring umbrellas or something like that, keep in mind that the entire, we haven't even taken into account the entire bleacher system. And that's all there. So people will be able to sit anywhere within that football complex. The cable will run right out of the building that they have there for the football games. I don't have a problem with tents. I just don't. I don't want it to turn into a 5-hour picnic. Somebody's got to clean it up at the end.
I thought you were going to say beach party, Ray.
Well, that's very possible.
Might be onto something.
Yeah.
So Donna, to answer your question, we can do a couple things. The code red system for the reverse 911 to give notice. The mailing we could do, Facebook, cable, website. Those are all 5 mediums we have. The local press, if they pick it up, or we can buy an advertisement if we needed to. So, I mean, those are really the 6-pronged approach to get the word out. So I want to answer that and say that that's the route we would go. Ray, relative to the cable and shooting the meeting, right now, we don't know. We know that the school can't shoot a football game live. It gets taped in that booth and then rebroadcast. So it's another logistic piece that we're trying to work through. We talked about it today. We're getting the right people in the room to have that discussion. But I just want to caution everybody, it's not there yet. We gotta do some work to get it there.
I think it'll work.
Any questions, Ed?
Yeah, a few, Ray. Thank you. So how are people who are on the field and possibly in the gym all going to vote? How are we taking remote voting?
What do you mean by remote voting, Ed?
I thought maybe I missed a part of this. Are people going to be possibly in a gym if there are more than 500 people? No, we can accommodate more on the football field. Oh, okay.
So the people in the gym would just be mobility issues and things like that. But the gym would also serve as the remote voting area. So if somebody was going to drive up and just go vote, they would walk down that side, they would register, walk down that sidewalk, walk in the back door of the gym, vote, and walk out the door and leave.
Okay.
So the gym is really kind of set up so people with mobility issues and things like that, and also the remote voting.
Are people going to be required to wear masks for this, I assume? Well,
That's a discussion that really came up. I would say that I mean, the governor says that if you're within 6 feet of somebody, you have to wear a mask. I would say for voting, in the gym, if you were going to vote in the gym, you were going to leave and drive through and everything like that, you would need to wear a mask. But that's really a question that, and I did want to discuss that, is what do you guys should we just require everyone to wear a mask, or just leave it alone?
Peter?
Yeah, I thought the edict from the state was that it doesn't matter whether you're within 6 feet or not. People outside of their homes should be wearing a mask. So I've seen people walking up and down my street wearing a mask. They're not within 6 feet of anyone, but they still had a mask on. So, unless that's lifted, I don't know how we recommend to go against something that's recommended by the state, right? So if whatever the state's recommending, I say we just stick with it and just keep it simple across the board, to your point, and just speak it, because if you start kind of picking and choosing where they have to do it and where they don't, just going to
Right.
confuse people. People will show up without the mask, Ray, and then people are going to be turned away from town meeting. That's going to cause a
Yeah, no, my recommendation is that we wear masks. That's my recommendation. But I wanted to hear from everybody else to see what they thought, so.
wear the mask.
I saw Donna.
Yeah, I would recommend masks too, unless we have further guidance from the state. But if somebody shows up without one, Ray, you're saying that's okay?
No,
Okay.
because if we make a decision that everybody shows up with a mask, I will have to remove someone who does not have.
And just not to interrupt, but we just got an order of 1,000 for the reopening for people who might come through the building, so we can get masks that we can hand out with the wristband. So we want to encourage them to bring their own, but if they don't have them, I think we're going to hand them out, correct?
Good solution.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea, Tim, because you don't want to turn people away from town meeting because they're going to say, I didn't know we had to wear
Right.
masks. But at least you say, nope, here's one, just take it.
Doreen, did you have your hand up?
Just the same thing. I think masks should be required. We're making all these accommodations for public safety. And so it makes sense to have the masks. I love the idea of having some available too.
I think it's a good plan if we have to do town meeting. I think it is a good plan. I do have concerns about, I know making it sound like drive-up voting makes it sound like they can come in just for a second and come out, but we had talked about, Ray, that they're going to have to be there to raise their hand. So they're going to have to figure out the timing from the parking lot into the gym. If there's discussion on an article they would like to vote on, they're going to have to make sure they're physically in the space to have their vote counted. You're talking more about a ballot vote, it's different, but hopefully we won't have any ballot votes. We always have to plan for them, but that's not, usually the raising your hand is what we would rather see. So I worry a little bit about people timing it right. Like they're sitting in their cars, they're listening to the discussion, but then do they have enough time to come in and register and actually have their vote heard? Or if they come in too early, they're sitting in there for 20 minutes longer than they had planned on. They didn't really want to leave their car for 20 minutes, but the discussion is still going on. So I still am to the point where I would rather just see us postpone it for another month to just let it all go. Let's have more information. I think that people are still unsure about coming out. We just opened up. I know we're doing everything we can to keep everybody safe, and if we have to do it, I think it's a great plan, but we don't have to do it. We can postpone, and I think we should talk about that. The school graduation is happening in July. We're going to spend a lot of money on all of this stuff. So why don't we combine it with the schools? We're using the same equipment that the school graduation would. So I would rather see it a month out, and just so that people feel more comfortable. I don't know. I think people are still really uncomfortable to go out right now.
So as far as the walk-up voting, that really only relates to a ballot. If you want to raise your hand or you want to stand to be counted, you have to be there. So the walk-up voting is only for ballot only, which people would have more than enough time to walk from their car to, if they hadn't already register and walk through the gym at 6-foot intervals. So that really only relates to the ballot vote. If you want to be there, if you want to vote, then you have to be there to raise your hand. If you're not there, you know me, I don't wait. So, we just move along. I think the idea, and I understand how much we're going to spend to have town meeting on June 20th or June 21st. I think that if you wait until July 20th, it's going to be even hotter. So that's my opinion. But I think this plan covers all the bases. And again, it's not perfect, but it does cover all the bases. I'm really not going to be concerned whether somebody can't get there in time. That's not my problem. We have other things to worry about.
Doreen?
Madam Chair, through you, either Ray or Tim, do we know the cost yet?
No, the M Media will have a cost by Thursday for the total. There's a lot of logistical pieces, but we drew up on a map and now on a whiteboard. Now we're trying to get that into CAD so we can do this mapping thing that Ray talked about in terms of where people go, directing people, signage. So we're working on that as we go and get these prices for the AV. I think that's where the cost, the lion's share. If we have to, if I have to print 1,000 books to go to a presentation for everything that's on the warrant, that's a crazy number, an insane waste of paper. If I can do a presentation where you can see the screen, even with the sun rising, because that'll be the side the screens are on. There's no good way to do it because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So I'm setting the screens to be on the west side facing east. So it's difficult. And that's the only way I can really broadcast from that location, unless I want to run wires all the way across the field to the other side and shoot the opposite way. So I don't have a cost. Short answer is I do not have a cost because there's a lot of those logistics to be worked out with the media company, which they tell me by Thursday they're going through every scenario, and from the chairs to the porta potties to having the stage set up and the cabling run back and having staff on hand. That'll all be some number. I just don't know what that is.
Doreen, I'll kick in my $450 budget.
Donna?
Yeah, I guess, so the graduation has definitely been scheduled for a day.
Is that to me? I met Tony out there today. He told me the 19th of July. I think it's a Sunday.
And they're going to require the same setup that we're going to require, monitors and chairs and everything else.
Yeah, they have. I think they're doing 900 chairs. I think they'll flip it. It'll be a mirror image of what we're talking about in terms of broadcasting. The stage would be in front of, for the graduation, the stage will be in front of the bleachers on the track, and people would look easterly. Their backs would face the water. So it'll just be an opposite of what we are currently thinking about.
Wouldn't it be better to have it the day before? Our town meeting the day before and then the graduation the next day?
Well, I think Ray's point is well thought. July is going to be much hotter than June. So, I mean, I think that's the logistic piece. There's probably cost savings there, but I don't know to what degree until I see the number that they're going to get versus the number I'm going to get. So I just don't know that.
So people are okay to sit out in the sun for graduation on the 19th, but not on the 18th?
Yeah, no, you're right. You make a good point.
We do have a question from Colleen Roy. How many people will you need to successfully register everyone and count votes in the different locations?
We'll need the normal, the way it'll be set up, it'll be the normal amount of people that normally register at a town meeting because it's all going to be in one spot and everybody's going to walk by. We are going to use the CERT team to help with the bands, the wristbands, and we will be calling on some other people to help. As far as moderators, I have not spoken to anybody. I know that people have called me and said that they would be more than willing to be moderators and deputy moderators because we have to have backups there. I'm not really not concerned about that. As far as counting the votes, again, that's something that we can use the CERT team for. They will help us out in any way that they can. So.
Ray, one other logistic that we might have to rely on those folks for. The way I have this drawn up now, there's 4 microphones that people can walk up to on the field, and even 2 in the gym. We're going to have to get them sanitized, I would think, after each use. So there's going to be certain people are going to have to, or someone's going to have to make sure that happens. The other piece of this that we didn't discuss at all was, we're all talking like we have this great plan, which we do, but, we have to consult with the Board of Health as we go forward on this. Legislative bodies, as this is, are exempt from a lot of these restrictions that the governor has put out, but we still want to have best practices all around. So Ray laid it out. You guys kind of bless it, and we'll figure out the logistics going forward with like the Board of Health, the Health Alliance, and any other compliance related issues that we need to. But those things will be, no harder than any other one. They just add more time, more complexity.
Anybody else? Doreen?
Yeah, I just, I want to add that I don't think there's going to be any difference in, I think it's a solid plan. It's a really good plan. And I don't think it's going to make any public health difference or public safety difference whether we do it in June or July, 3.5 weeks later. But I think, it should be taken into consideration, especially on a year that we're asking for an override. If the cost is something like $30,000, does it make sense if we're using the same company to set up once instead of set up twice? It's not like it's 4 months apart. It's really only a matter of about 3 weeks. So I would be in favor of moving it to July just for that savings. Do everything exactly the same. We can't guarantee a day in June isn't going to be hotter than a day in July. And like Donna's point, people will come out for graduation. I'd like to hear maybe from the rest of the board of, I just think it's a discussion worth having.
Yeah.
Peter?
So my thoughts on that is graduation is like an hour and a half. They're going to read names. You don't have people making amendment to motions and so on and so forth and having to acknowledge. It's a pretty well-oiled machine where they kind of get the students in and out, been going for 10 years. And whereas town meeting could last upwards to 4 hours in some situations. And we've seen that, I think, in past meetings. So if you were to, you could have people out, and I'm saying out in the elements longer during the hottest part of the summer and take that chance. Like there is the chance that it could be definitely hotter in mid-July than it would be in mid to late June. But if you were to also look at the configuration in which the school needs to accommodate and set up for its graduation to be done on Sunday, then I think what you run into is, let's say it rains on Saturday. Okay, let's say it rains on that Saturday before their graduation. And then they're going to hold their graduation on Sunday. And then, what do we do, right? Do we wait another weekend? I personally think maybe utilize that weekend as a rain date. Okay, if weather is too bad to have it, and then still schedule it in the end of June. At least it gives us an out. So I kind of see your point about utilizing that date in the economies of scale, but I don't know if the accommodations for the graduation are going to align with what we need to run a town meeting. Totally two different events, totally two different setups, totally different sets of logistics, if you ask me.
Keep in mind that you're not going to, I'm sorry, Ed, you're not going to, you can, I call it glom onto the school department on this thing. But when rental companies come in, they rent one chair for 1 day. They rent it for 2 days. If it's $10, it's $20. So you really have to look at that. If there's tents out there, keep in mind the school department's not going to have it. Not going to have any cable. They're going to record this. They're going to use the sound system that's on the field. And if we keep it another day, you're going to pay. It's not like it's going to be free. It's not rental companies are not just going to sit there and go, oh yeah, you keep it for the whole weekend, no problem. We'll pick it up on Monday. You don't owe us a dime. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, but there still would be a reduction in cost of somewhat. I mean, they set them all up and they have to pick them all up. And I do think there would be a savings. Ed, but at
You can
first,
see Ed, but Ed's got his hand raised. He has a couple times.
Ed,
Sorry, yeah, I agree with Ray here. I mean, while there might be a cost savings here, we're talking about pennies on the dollar. We're about to get into an FY21 budget discussion where, we're going to talk about real cost savings. And I'd be interested to hear the juxtaposition of people's various positions here. But what we got to keep our eye on is there's a reason why we want to get this vote done sooner rather than later, is because with the money that would be passed by the contingent budget, there are positions that we would actually hire and people out there waiting to find out if they have jobs. It's harder for the schools to hire people or retain people that they want to hire in July versus June. So we got to, bear in mind, there is actual governing here to be done, an operation of government where you would want to get these things sorted out sooner rather than later. And that 3-4 weeks does actually make a difference. Whereas, as Ray said, maybe setup costs, in the hour or two that you save for someone who's out there for $15 an hour, you save, but who cares? When weighted against actually retaining professionals that you want to retain.
well, some of your points may me just stick with my position even more. When Peter, you're talking about the length of time town meeting takes. So we're going to be out there exposed to everybody for maybe 4 hours. That's a long time. So I worry about people's safety. I think people's safety is more important than making sure we do it as soon as we possibly can. I think it's smarter to wait. And then if the rain date could be on graduation Sunday, again, if graduation is only an hour and a half, 2 hours, there's a lot more time in that day. We could do it on the same day. So I don't know. I think we should postpone, but it sounds like it sounds like that's just me. So if that's the case, let's just make a decision and move to the next thing.
Well, if I may clarify something, Madam Chair, yeah, I did say those in town meeting, but no one can predict. And Ray has many years of experience in this, especially in Grafton. No one ever can accurately predict town meeting duration. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, we've had town meetings that lasted 30 minutes. I think in October town meetings, we just can't predict it. So I don't want to have something that could potentially impact at a later date in the summer where it is historically, and if I were looking at the odds of the weather, is going to be statistically warmer days than it would be in that June period. And to your point about people's safety, I agree. I love the fact that we're talking about everyone's safety here, but we also have to take into consideration that we can't accommodate everyone. We're never going to make everyone 100% happy. So whether we have it later, you're going to upset people. Whether we have it in June, you're still going to probably upset people. And I just want to acknowledge that what we're all saying here, I think we're all trying to come up with what we think is the right solution, and Ray's asking us. I just say keep it at the meeting date and time that we have set already, and that if things go sideways, the moderator has the authority to postpone those 30 days, and perhaps maybe we do then consider having it during graduation weekend on that Saturday or whatever following day that it kind of falls in between. So I think we have some good contingency plans in the event that this June date doesn't work.
Anybody else? We did have one question about the fact that Ray, if we have it in July, Ray will not be the moderator. We'll have a new moderator. And so I know you guys, when I was off last time, talked about that. And while I do personally, I appreciate Ray's experience, and I think that, certainly he's great to have. I don't see it as not having him as the strong, as a reason not to do it, because Ray, are you disappearing on us? You'll be around. Wouldn't you help the new moderator?
No, I'm going away.
I can't imagine that Ray wouldn't.
You can't
help.
get rid of me that, you can't get rid of me that easy.
I just can't imagine that Ray wouldn't help. Maybe I'm wrong, but
So-
I would think that Ray would help.
So just so you know that one of the things that I want to do for this town meeting is to involve both candidates. So, that's, I'm not gonna grab one or the other. I'm gonna grab both of them, and they're either gonna be, if they want to, be deputy moderators or whatever to help out in this situation. But I do have to agree with Peter. Every plan needs a plan B. Let's go for June 20th. The plan B will be graduation night, or the night, the next day, or the Sunday if it rains. You got to have a plan B. I'm not holding off on this. I'm as safe, and my family is as safe as everybody else out there. We don't go anywhere. We don't go to supermarkets. I go to job sites now, and I'm decked out in mask and gloves and everything like that. There's no way that I want to jeopardize anyone's health or anything like that. But we do need to move on, and we do need to get town meeting done. But as long as we have a plan B, I think we should just move ahead.
Doreen?
Yeah, so I was going into this hearing the discussion 100% convinced that we should hold it in July. And based on this discussion, I've changed my mind. I think that, again, for me personally, I think that we're taking all accommodations we can to keep the public safe, and nothing is going to really change dramatically between June and July. And if it does, the moderator can make a decision on that. Peter also brought up a good point as far as rain dates and having a plan B. I think that having July in our back pocket as a second date, seeing that this is just going to take planning, public outreach, we've set the date, and it may be more confusing to the public at this point to change the date. And then as far as the my concern about finances, it's probably not going to be as big as I thought the gap would be. So I'd like to make a motion that we hold town meeting on June 20th, starting at 9 a.m. Is there a motion that I'm supposed to read, or Peter could read, or is that my motion?
No, that would be your motion if there's a second.
Well, before we second that, don't we already have the date and time set?
The time, that's a different time.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Andrew,
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Peter?
I just want to thank everyone in everyone's participation. Ray, Tim, Becca, Jay Cummings, Superintendent of Schools, the school department, and everyone for thinking this through. This is definitely a first for us in Grafton. I just want to thank everybody again for their time and dedication to town and keeping us safe while we're trying to keep some sort of continuous of our. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, I will go by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Okay.
Frisbee, aye.
Doreen, you are muted. Can you do it again?
DeFazio, aye.
Thomas, nay. All right, motion has passed. Moved on.
Can I just ask you to consider one other thing from the members? Just setting the rain date of Sunday, the 21st, in the event that the 20th does rain. Is that agreeable to folks?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So Tim, that's going to be up to the moderator to make that determination. So the moderator will make that date. They can delay it by 30 days. I don't think we need to make a motion for that.
But in
Okay,
terms
I
of
just-
telling the public when the rain date is so they can plan on it.
Yeah, just say it's the next day,
Just
Sunday.
say-
Sunday at 9 a.m.
So any other,
The only other thing that we'll need is to move those warrant articles after the budget, the 3 warrant articles that could get a lot of discussion and controversy and things like that. Now, I can do that myself. It's not something I really want to do, but I can do that on the floor. But I'd rather just ask the board, either we move it now, or I ask the board at the meeting to move those 3 articles after Article 6. So it's really up to you how you want to do it. So,
okay.
it doesn't require a vote at town meeting. It doesn't require
Right.
anything. I would just ask the board somebody make a motion to move article, whatever those numbers are after Article 6, and that's it. So,
Okay. Donna, I can't hear. Go ahead.
I think it's a good idea for you to do it now. I mean, for us to say that that's what we want to do. I think to group them all together after the budget.
Yeah, we just have to do it now. We just don't have the warrant in front of us. There's specific numbers, like in terms of which ones, and some of the decisions have multiple warrant articles. So it's not like a single article. It's like a group of articles.
so what you would want to do is you just want to, the warrant's closed. So what you would want to do is just change it in the document. And then I'll just make that change the day of the meeting. Oh, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to vote on anything because the warrant's closed. It's now my warrant. So that's, we just do it that way.
Donna?
But people familiar with the current warrant may not realize that we've made that change or that you plan to make that change. So we need to communicate that because
Yeah, that would-
otherwise people,
Yeah, that would need to be in the documents that we're going to send out and things like that.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
yep.
So with the board's approval, can I just work with Ray on adjusting those articles? We can post 14 days prior to the meeting, or do you, I don't know how we want this to work.
You mean adjusting the order of them?
That's correct?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I think just to say, just for clarification, I think the other articles Ray is referring to are the super park articles and the marijuana article, unless anybody else has anything else they're thinking also needs to be moved up. Those are the 2 other issues I think we're going to get a lot of attendance for.
Yep.
Unless,
Yep.
I would think the 25 Worcester Street article too. But I'm just biased.
You're kidding it.
okay.
Madam Chair, I don't want to make any more recommendations. This is really complex enough. So I'm good.
Tim and I'll work together.
Look, Ray, I'm going to look at you. You're going to make the adjustments, and
Yeah.
I'll make the motion at town meeting to take them out of order. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'll be
Yep.
that guy.
Yep, that'll be fine. That's all I need.
Okay. So are you guys okay with setting a rain date for the following day, just so that people understand that that's when it's going to be? Okay, can I have a motion to that effect then?
Madam Chair, I motion that we set a rain date for the special and annual town meeting to be held on the following day at 9 a.m. at the same location.
Second.
In the event of rain. Right? In the event of rain?
Look, or earthquake, I don't know, sure.
Right. Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? By roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Stock eye.
DeFazio, aye.
Thomas, aye. Okay. All right. Oh, Donna?
Can I ask when the meeting is going to be scheduled for us to go over the warrants and who's going to read them, et cetera? Do we have a date for that yet?
Usually that's the Thursday before. have we put a date on the calendar yet for that? I mean, it's really, we get together with Ray.
Yeah, tentative, it's the 18th, June 18th. But we haven't solidified the dates. Now we can, because we know we're moving forward and everything's in place. So if you can hold the date, the people who can hear my voice, hold the 18th for town meeting logistics meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to the next? We had decided all these. Candy's been quiet up there, so I'm assuming, Candy, you would have waved your arms frantically if there was something about the plan that you thought you couldn't do as town clerk.
Correct. There's a couple things I think I can add in there, you know, that I'll discuss with Ray and Tim over the next couple days, and, you know, and go from there. It's just whole pads. We found out we can use them outside, and if we wanted to do that versus the paper voting list, but this stuff we can just bring up really quick with them.
Thank you. All right, so the next item is fiscal year 21 budget.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Oh, good night, Ray.
Night.
This is the other topic. Again, I was off and on, so I'm not quite sure. Were there specific questions? Did members have specific questions?
Madam Chair, I was really counting on some information that was going to be forwarded to the board tonight, but I spoke with Mr. McInerney, and part of what I wanted to see modeled out was the use of free cash to fund expenses to balance the FY21 budget to restore some services that were taken out as a result of the additional cuts. But seeing how we haven't got that information ahead of time, I'd like to say I really don't have any questions at this point in time, and I wanted to state that I'm quite disappointed that we didn't get that information when I asked for it last week, and even talked to the town administrator about it on Friday.
Yeah, if I could, I apologize for that, but I will tell you that the confusion we created last week, even for our own staff, relative to the iterations of the proposed override, the recasting of the projections, COVID-19, a contingent budget, to put together something concise that was encapsulating every possible scenario was just impossible to send out before today. So I apologize for that, but without some context around it, just to answer your question, if we were to do all capital and fund all shortfalls for revenue for fiscal 21, you would have a balance of $200,000 in free cash. If you did not fund those capital items, you would save $900,000. So you would end up with basically $1 million of free cash if you were to fund everything. I'm sorry, $800,000 if you were to fund everything. So what I thought I would do, if you are so inclined, is I can go through 21, and at the end or in the middle of this presentation, I'll encapsulate what it means to use free cash to fund all of those items, with the override failing or with the override passing, and what that means. But I think the context of knowing where we started to where we are now is pretty critical to know the path forward.
Okay. You want to take us through that then?
Sure. Becca, will you pull up that slideshow? All right, so slide one is really, well, slide two. Becca, go to the next slide. There you go. So what we've done here is we wanted to clearly articulate pre-COVID what the balanced budget was predicated on with the revenues we had pre-COVID. So every year, we cover this a lot, so I apologize, but we always have an allotment or an allowance under Proposition 2.5. We get to grow the levy by 2.5%. We also had state aid increasing under revenue estimates to $200,000, and we had motor vehicle excise tax increasing, along with marijuana permits and fees of a total of $490,000 in increased revenue in new growth. So that gave us $2.2 million of new money in which to allocate to all departments. So 2.2 million. So you got to kind of hold on to that number throughout this presentation. That's all new money, and how we redistribute that we'll cover in a second. So the total revenues pre-COVID for 2021 was $68.2 million. So the next slide, just to take you through this, the request eclipsed the revenues. The request from all departments eclipsed that 2.2 million by 1.1 million. So of course, we can't fund a budget and be on balance, so we had to find reductions. So we had to get back to a number that we could afford. So the reductions were made to the requests. This still means there's growth inside of budgets. No one's base budget has been reduced in this scenario, but to get to that $1.1 million excess expenses over revenues, the town reduced its request by 568 and the school reduced by 590. But again, there's still growth inside of that number for both town and school. And I'll get to those dollars and percentages. So 68.2 is the budgeted amount for revenue and the budgeted amount for expenses pre-COVID. So then we talked about an override, and I think this is where Peter's question come in. Let me show slide 4, Beck. In terms of all that new money that we have, that 2.2, this is the percent allocation of what every department or fund needs to get in order to sustain. So this kind of just breaks out the categories of new money and how that money is allocated. So I think that's a pretty good slide, just keeping you back in your mind in terms of growth within the operating budget. Slide 5, this is going back to the initial slated proposal for the school to grow over the next 5 years. Under the override proposal, they were going to get 1.8 million more of new money, and then they revised that when COVID came through and we realized we didn't have the revenue we thought. So they revised that number down in order to recast the curve, basically, for this forecasting model that we have for growth throughout the district and the town. So initially, when we were talking override back in February, March, when we made the decision for the 4 million, we were going to fund the captain position, reinstate the full select board assistant, reinstate the assistant town planner, reinstate the part-time custodian, and fund the police cruisers for a replacement program. So those were things that we were going to do pre-COVID with the override money. Those things are, along with the schools increase, we wanted to have those things available to us. And so we were going to raise, in that scenario, 812,907 out of if the override were to pass, out of that $4 million, we would use 812 to balance the budget for fiscal 21, pre-COVID. So that cost to taxpayer on this slide is average cost based on home values, $122 per year. So we've covered this before, but I just want, it's important because when you go through all these scenario settings relative to the budget and COVID, you got to kind of remember what page you were on when you left. So go to slide 6. So our revenues, where we had decreases in revenues, we had to balance the budget based on that. So we had 100,000 estimated to be off in motor vehicle excise. We had 270 in fees, which included the marijuana fees, 46,000 in license and permits, and then state aid reduction of 201.99 for a total reduction in revenue of 617, which we had to come up with in a variety of ways. So our request now, based on those revenues, is 67,618 versus the original of 68.2. So new revenues will match the expenses of 67,618. So the shortfall we had to make up for those reductions in revenue was 617, 542. The difference in the number between the 599 and the 542, that $47 was just excess levy that we just applied to the budget for fiscal 21. So slide 7. So this is FY21 post-COVID. So this expense reduction plan, the 617 reduction, this is how it broke out in terms of making up that delta. So we have the municipality at 374, the school district at reducing 52,180, and then the use of free cash and or stabilization of 190. And that's to get to a balanced budget, making the adjustments downward based on revenue. So that's without passing an override, what we need to do to balance the budget, which right now it is balanced. So the one piece, the free cash stabilization, this goes back and forth, and I go back and forth with it with people all the time relative to, do we use free cash, the 190, 721, or do we use stabilization? Again, I'll try to make the case that we are going to sell 8 Pine. We have a recommendation to move forward with one company to sell that property to for a development for a sale price of 1.725. We get to split that with the state depending on the closing date. So I would want to use those funds to replenish stabilization because it's something people can see. It's something I can show to bond rating agencies that we're true to our word in terms of using stabilization for one-time expenses. And when we don't use it for one-time expenses, we put that money right back in. And I think I can show a clearer line than using free cash. So that's why that's up for a discussion. So the next slide, 8, these are the reductions in order of what we did to get to the 617. So municipal salaries, these are across the board salaries, and we get into the detail of those in a second. With 70,000, 25,000 from the reserve fund, small amounts for GIS, 2,000. Police equipment and fire equipment moved to a warrant article. Again, you're going to use free cash to fund those particular 2 items. And then fire department expenses, we reduced by 2,400. And then we did some cost shifting inside of the DPW budget for 150. It's a combination of using Chapter 90 for their professional technical and using the tree account, which we created at a previous town meeting to deal with dead trees and replacing those as we remove them. Reductions to the library expenses, which includes the 2 people halfway through the year that they wanted to hire to meet the needs of the library should they open on time and so forth. So those were there. And then obviously the school department having that additional reduction from their request of 52,180. And then the 190,721 is the money you would use in stabilization and or free cash to balance the budget for fiscal year 21. So the details inside of that on slide 9, this is where that $70,000 comes up with. And I think there was a lot of angst about this because we talked a lot about a 0% increase for all municipal and all leadership positions inside the school district. And we had a number. And then we talked about, hey, 2% for everybody and that's it. And then, of course, our initial proposal for municipal salaries was trying to make people more competitive with their current wages. So that's what this slide really does. It breaks out what those reductions were, keeping people at just a modest growth of 2%, with the exclusion of some folks that are either covered by collective bargaining units or they elected not to get an increase at all. So the 30,000 is from the economic development coordinator position to make up that 70K. You have a small 112 for the finance committee assistant. The growth inside the principal assessor's line, we were trying to get competitive. The person would still get 2%, but they would be reduced to the initial proposal of 6%. So the 4% you save is $3,100. The town clerk was the biggest controversial thing, doing some analysis in terms of her competition out there, significantly underpaid, which is why that's such a big boost. If we were to reduce that, you pick up $10,510. Assistant building inspector, that increase just based on performance was asked to go up $943. The highway superintendent, again, an initial proposal for the workload and competitiveness of the job. We tried to look at that 5% for those next 2 positions to market if we can't do that, and we're not planning on doing that under this scenario anyways, we reduce that, and this is how much you save when you make that reduction down to 2%. And then the recreation director, again, we were on a pattern of growth to be competitive with the recreation director, so that would be a reduction of 710. And then those positions in the library for the last 2 months of the last quarter, there's savings in those, not hiring those positions of 17,599. So that's the lion's share of what the detail is in terms of that 70,000 of municipal salaries that we reduced because we're going to, give everybody 2%, as I mentioned at the outset. So those numbers come down significantly. And I know you guys will ask questions about this slide in a second, so I'll just tell Becca just to be ready relative to what the 2% cost is versus what this cost is, and what that delta is. But slide 10, just to go through this, because others might think that there's opportunity for more reductions to be had. And I think if you look historically at the operating budget for the town, and we have those numbers, just not on the slide, they've contracted, and we've done our best to contract in every area, as you can see on the sheet. So I put this up for two reasons. The bottom two lines, unclassified and debt service, really can't be touched. They're really not things that we can, we can try to do things on health insurance, and we've done it in the past, and we've limited the increase to health insurance by changing plans and moving people around. So we do that. That's just part of operating, but it's always going to go up, unfortunately. Education is kind of our soul, our heart. We want to fund that. It's a sacred cow. We don't want to do anything but help education get as much as they can to be as great as they can be. So you can see in this that there's three categories that are really untouched, but you can't make up the difference in any of the other five categories, right? General government, public safety, public works, culture and recreation, and health and human services. There's not enough of a margin inside those to make up $600,000. So we have to kind of be creative of how we keep those services intact and not eliminate a complete service. So that's what we're proposing to do, is not eliminating a service in its entirety, but still keeping the heart and soul funded as best we can, given those scenarios. So the top right of this just talks about the percentage allocation. And I know the Sustainability Committee will come back with, general government, public safety. I won't say I know they'll come back, but my hypothesis is the numbers of those other communities in these budgeting categories, because they're all the same, will be higher than ours. Because we did that, and we shared that with you back in January. So 3.6% of the operating budget to general government, 5% to public safety, 4% for public works. The SOAR department's self-sustaining, so I really don't even have to have a discussion about it. Less than 1% for health and human services in terms of budget allocation, and culture recreation, 1.8% of the entire budget goes to those particular programs. So there's not a lot of room in there relative to making reductions. Given the fact that we know we have $2.1 million of new money in which to disperse, and that's what that dollar change from 20 to 21 is. It's showing you where those dollars are going. And I think that's important to note, where those dollars go with all those new funds. So I'm getting to you, Peter. I know you want to cover the debt, not the debt exclusion, but the free cash and/or stabilization. So we'll go to slide 11. So now post-COVID, we estimate you have 1.6 million of new revenue in which to distribute to all those departments we just covered and all those spending categories on slide 10. So this is just how those dollars of new dollars get broken up. I don't want people to be confused and say this is how the budget is, because it's not how the budget is. It's just how the new money is distributed overall across all departments. I'm losing my voice. So we'll go to slide 12. So the current override proposal, you'll know we went through some iterations with Jay and I made a recommendation. The tri-boards got together. They chose another number. This is all pre-COVID, so we just didn't know a lot of stuff in terms of these reductions. What has happened is we're using or proposing to use some of the override in the first year to offset those reductions due to COVID. So that 617, we want to raise it in in the event that the override were to pass. So this slide just lays out exactly what we showed people last week in terms of the value. It's going up. People's tax bills on average are going up in fiscal 21 regardless. It's going up by $286 on average. And then the proposal for the override funds, we're going to raise that 832, both for the school and for all the cuts that I just went through for the 617,000. So that comes up to 832. We would use that of the first year of the $4 million override should it pass. The average cost for that 832 is an additional $128 per year for the average single family home. So you would add that 286 to the 128 and you'd get your total for the 251. We haven't talked about capital in terms of that 800,000, but I sense, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, we want to hold the taxpayer as harmless as possible, so we wouldn't institute that 800,000 for capital stabilization in the first year. But if you were to do it, just know that it's an additional 123. So the total could be, if you did capital and did everything else on this list, would be 537 is the increase. It includes what's automatic and what would be brought on by the override. So now slide 13, we'll go to this free cash balance scenario that Peter came up with, which is good. I never want to use one-time monies to fund any operating expense. It's just something you don't do, because that cliff gets so much higher and steeper when you go out and out years. And there's some communities to our west that have done just that to offset their tax rate. They budgeted free cash into their operations so they could keep the tax rate lower. And when the money's gone, that tax rate just, they have to make cuts. They can't make it up with the allowance of new growth and Prop 2.5 allowance. They just can't do it. So they have significant cuts in those out years. So you guys don't do that, which is great. We don't want to do that. But given COVID and this whole situation that we're in, Peter asked a good question relative to what if we just use free cash, override passes or doesn't pass? I don't know if that's the scenario, but hold people harmless, use free cash, go for operations and go for capital, or go for just operations and forgo capital. That's what this slide is attempting to do. There are some things we need to do at town meeting on the 20th of June. So we have to deal with snow and ice. We estimate it's a $15,000 free cash hit to pay for deficit spending in snow and ice. We do have the balance of the street light account. For the street lights, we got a grant. So we'll have that balance to put towards snow and ice. So that's the plan as it stands now. Prior year bills, I don't have the details of why it's $5,000, but I know it is at this point. Vacation, sick, and buyback, there's $10,000 there for people that we know that'll depart our employ over the coming year, and or before the end of the fiscal, I should say. And the police and fire equipment are the articles that we talked about in this presentation. So basically, we need to take out the leases first. We got to make sure we pay our debt in terms of these three items that are on the bottom. The pumper tanker, that's a $99,000 lease annually. Engine 3 is $103,000, and then the Dell server is $10,800. We just didn't have cash flow to replace that when it finally died. So we had a lease it a couple years back. I don't know, Becca, you could probably talk about the details on that if people wanted to know it. But basically, we have to do that $214,000, $12,000. So we're going to have to do that no matter what. So you started with 1.8, and you're going to go down to 1.84 if you use closeout articles at town meeting. So closeout articles are things that, like, we bought a truck that we thought was $300,000. It was only $295,000. We have $5,000 sitting in an article that we just close out at the end of the fiscal to offset other costs, which gets voted on by town meeting. We talk about it with the finance committee. We talk about it with you, but we estimate there's $312 in articles to be closed out that we can use to offset anything, capital plan or snow and ice or any combination that's on this sheet. So just to give you a flavor of the balance of free cash, it's 1.8. We know we have to make capital lease payments, so that's what we're going to do, the bottom three things on this. So what doesn't get funded if we don't have a capital plan? There's $909,000 that won't get funded. So you have an all-wheel vehicle for the fire department. You have a live scan for $17,000 for the police department, which incidentally, I reported last week about asking for a bond bill for IT through the state to get this funded. So even though we have it in here, we're still searching outer reaches to see if we can find money to offset these costs. So that's that 17,000. Two dump trucks, a 1 ton and a 5 ton. Huge swing in price variant there. Phase 1 of the electrical upgrade in the municipal center that's needed for code compliance. It's, very frayed wire that runs through this building, so it's just not safe anymore.
Tim, I'm sorry, I have a question. Isn't that the vehicle 44, the 5-ton dump truck, doesn't have a grant?
The grant we're using, Becca, can you clarify that? Because we got the money for the VW settlement. Is it in this, or is it in this year, or is it in this plan? Is Becca there?
Yeah, sorry. So the grant is a reimbursement grant. So we have to fund the truck, and then we get a reimbursement back from the state. Can't put money back into free cash. It's not an accounting procedure that we can do. So what will happen is we'll get the grant reimbursement funds in. They'll be deposited into the general fund. They'll go to fund balance, and then they'll become certified as free cash next year. It's not a perfect offset. It's not like we just spend and then take it in and can spend on something else in this fiscal year. It has to wait a year to go through the recertification process for free cash, and it will be made available next year.
So what's that for 198, Becca, or the 250?
It's the 250.
But is it 198 is the grant? How much is the grant for?
I
don't think it was for the full amount.
I think it's 182.
All right. That sounds right too. All right, so the van replacement for COA was the next one that I was on. Access road, a lot of school stuff that goes through this list. And so if we don't do it, that's what we will not do if we don't want to do a capital plan. So that'll allow you, if you wanted to model this out, you would have $1.1 million left in free cash if you weren't to do this, but you had to fund all the other items that were doing a combination of articles and or reductions to balance the budget. If you were to fund both the capital plan and those reductions, you would have a free cash balance of $200,000, which is incredibly low from our standpoint. We've never been under 860, I think. And we always kind of coalesce around the $1 million mark in terms of having that as a safety net, along with our stabilization. But that's how it plays out. And the reason, Peter, that again, I probably didn't do it any service here because I probably did a splendid job explaining this, but to just send this slideshow to you and give you this, I think you would have been more upset with me than if I took the time to kind of walk you through and explain the differences of using one-time monies for operations and then using one-time monies to offset the COVID crisis or not. So I appreciate a little dispensation here relative to wanting to put this in context versus sending it out cold as it is. So Becca, I'm sure I missed something relative to the numbers in terms of the free cash. Can you want to give us any additional information?
Relative to free cash, I don't think so. I'm sure there are questions, maybe. I don't know why I can't go back here. Oh, there we go. Because Tim mentioned it, but it's kind of tough to try to show several different scenarios depending on what you choose to fund. But Peter, or any of the board members, if you want clarification on any of this now or later, obviously happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, I have, Madam Chair, I have a question. So the idea here is to use FY19's free cash number that was certified back in October, correct? For operations this year. So remind me again why, Tim, you feel that we're under this $800,000 threshold, this $1 million threshold that we typically have for free cash. Can you, I was a little kind of lost there. If you could just re-explain that to me one more time.
A number of budget cycles I've been through with different finance committee members to go under the balance of $1 million carried forward. So that becomes the base, and it gives you a good security blanket in terms of, something like COVID-19 or what have you. But you would go significantly under that. And to use those revenues or those dollars, not even revenues, those free cash on operations in fiscal 22, they won't be available. You just simply will not have them. So if we end up with $1 million balance as the base, and we either excess, we get more revenue in than we anticipated, which is always a good thing, and we spend less, that'll make up free cash in the next fiscal year. So that, if we budget to the bone and no one turns anything back, I don't have that as a resource to generate free cash. And if my revenues are worse than what I'm anticipating now, you'd make deeper cuts in year 2 because you wouldn't have those dollars to continue that operation.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Tim, if you could humor me and maybe send me the analysis over the past 4 years of what the free cash balances were and when they were certified and how they were used, maybe that'll help me get a little bit more context to understand how you're explaining it, and respect how you put this presentation together. But I also wanted to just preface too that I'm not looking to shift our fiscal policy or ask the board to consider shifting a fiscal policy going forward, that it's going to utilize free cash in perpetuity for funding expenses. Understanding that this is, these are, life-changing events that are occurring today, and I'm trying to figure out a way to, basically buy us some time, for lack of better words, not trying to finance time forever. And knowing that, next year is going to be even tighter, but I also think it's better to utilize free cash, in my estimation, than to dip in the stabilization, because we haven't really been funding stabilization, in my opinion anyways, to effectively use it like some other communities around us that have built that up since 2008, 2009 crash, where they're utilizing that to fund their expenses without really degrading their operations. So that's the only purpose of me trying to look at it this way and understand that. So let me get this right. So we certify free cash in October, okay? And that's last year's money. I'm not looking to do that again the following year. So explain to me that using this one-time method to fund these expenses, Tim, is not a good idea. Just do that for me one more time.
So we started out at the outset. I'm trying to find, I have a historic analysis. I don't know if I have the uses of free cash except for capital and or snow and ice, but we can put that on the screen if I can find it, but I'll try to answer the question as I'm looking for this. So the idea is you have 2.2 million of new dollars to use, and that 2.2 million always grows by a percentage because you have an allowance under 2.5, which you get to add to whatever the new growth number is. So people build in the community, we have new growth, we have additions, we have pools put in. So there's $50 million of new growth. We get an extra $600,000 of new money because of that $50 million of investment. So I have that, and I have what's allowed under 2.5. Those are kind of guaranteed dollars that we put into operating every year. If we pivot from that and used, whether it's 300,000 of free cash or $1 million to cover the shortfall, well, let's use the real number, we're trying to cover $832,000 to not have an impact to the taxpayer one time. That number did not decrease. Your expenses don't go down by that amount in the following year. So you have to raise that someplace, or you have to make further reductions.
Okay. So I guess what I want to know then from you is what percentage of free cash has been made available for this budget from unencumbered funds from the previous fiscal budget?
Well, I just, let me just break that down a little bit. This budget in fiscal 21, looking at July 1 start date?
No, so your free cash was certified from FY19, correct?
Correct.
So what percentage of those, percentage of that number was made up from unencumbered funds from the entire town budget? Do you have that data available?
So turnback, you want to know how much of that 1.8 was from turnback?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it right in front of me, but yeah, we can certainly do. But remember the other side of it's revenue too. So you gotta.
I want to look at what's been budgeted and break that out, Tim, if you would, for me, just for my own benefit, just so I understand that number a little bit better. And I admit, I thought I understood free cash pretty confidently until tonight. So if you could break that out for me personally, that would be great. I don't know about the rest of my board if they want that data, but I think that that might help me understand your spreadsheet or the presentation a little bit better.
Are you asking what percentage of this year's budget was the operating budget was sustained by one-time money?
No, what percentage of free cash was made from all of the expense line items that we budgeted for that weren't spent? So there's the turnbacks that Tim said, okay?
Right.
So every account has some turnbacks, some don't. So I think it'd be great for us to know what that percentage of what that $1.8 million, what does that truly represent? And I understand that there's revenues that are generated from last fiscal year that go into that account, to Tim's point, where we're building our revenue base based on, like you said, $50 million worth of improvements to around here from permit fees and so on and so forth. And I kind of threw that number out because Tim did, but I understand where that number comes from. So I know that there's a percentage of that. I just want to know, what is the ratio? Is that 50% of that number? Is it 80% of 1.8 million? I don't know that. Yeah,
that's a good question. I can tell you from my experience of having been on FinCom, it's usually about $1 million of that number, I think. Like in the 3 years I did it, and people would always ask me this, I honestly couldn't tell you from looking at the unexpended turnbacks, there really was never any pattern about where it would come from. It was always sort of like, this department didn't have to spend as much as we thought. Someone over here retired, and it would generally kind of build up over the year to be like that. I never noticed a pattern, but it's an excellent big picture question about whether or not we can budget a little tighter, have fewer turnbacks. But at the same time, long term, I'm not sure where that gets us, because this is how we budget for capital. I just want to make sure that I preface this, that this whole board understands that this is not, in my estimation, a good financial practice in other words, forever. Not a good. No, I get it. To put into place. But as for this moment in time and what we're looking at and trying to talk about every option available, we have override. There's an option out there, and we know that to some people, that's a third rail. Using one-time monies and stabilization, that's another third rail. Using one-time free cash, that's another third rail. So I guess at the end of the day, I want to be able to say to our community that the five of us had a really in-depth conversation and look at each one of these numbers and these scenarios, and then what are the risks associated with doing them. Well, the only reason that it's a third rail to spend one-time money on operational expenses is because that money won't be there the next year. The reason why you have that one-time money is because operational money was turned back and not used. So it's just a red flag that eventually this practice is going to end, and you're going to be at a place where I think we are now, where you're going to need an override. So for the people that are wanting us to spend free cash on operational expenses, yeah, you could do that, but you're going to need to make up for it with an even greater override later on, because that free cash is eventually, I hate that it's called free cash. It's not helpful, but that set aside money, or that unencumbered money, is going to run out, and operationally you're going to be at a point where you need to raise more income to make up for that. It's like paying for anybody you would employ with a savings account. Eventually that position's not going to pay for itself, and you're going to need to bring in more money or cut the position. So you're only delaying the inevitable. It's a red flag indicator that you're in dangerous territory, which is where we are. That's all.
So I'll just tell you quickly through the chair back to Peter, the free cash generated from turnbacks is less than 1% of the operating budget. So the one sheet I have in front of me, and there's 377 lines on the budget turnback piece that goes to the Department of Revenue. But just the one quick I could find, and I know we've been holding steady to this because it bears out in the fact that we have pretty much the same certification of free cash every year. You have $51 million appropriation in 17, and you turn back 1%, $500,000. So I don't, I think anybody within a 1%, it's actually 0.97% is what it comes out to. And it's probably lower in out years. But we have that breakdown in terms of the, if it comes from revenue or if it comes from expenses, but it's 1%. And to budget within 1%, I think is, I don't know. I don't think anybody else is budgeting within 1%. So there's no reductions, further reductions we can make unless we are making a decision to eliminate some service and make that reduction. But there's not like, 10% hidden in a line where there's 200,000 and it just always rolls forward. There is all those appropriation balances go to the finance committee. They go to the state of Massachusetts. They get a certification for free cash. So the accountant's office, does all that stuff. It's not like we jury rig it in any way. So that's what it is. But it's inside of 1% in terms of turnback. So I think, the business world, to get 1% of your budget would think we were running a pretty successful operation.
And the other thing to note too is as our levy capacity has shrunk over the course of the 2014 override, as has our free cash. So back in 2016, our certified free cash was around $2.5 million, and now it's at 1.8. So the free cash balance is reflective sort of where we are. And, we have paid for operational expenses over the years with that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think John Allen's position was free cash, right?
I'm sorry, Jen, is Becca still there? Becca, in the budget book, we have a sheet on free cash and its makeup. I know that's part of the budget book, but I just want to, that 2.5, Ed, I think is a good point, because I think that was the result of the federal aid bailout from 2009, that the schools ended up turning back a huge number that year because of that. So it'd be good. I have one spreadsheet on it. If you give me 4 minutes, I can find it.
But the answer to the question is yes, we did fund John Allen with free cash the first couple of years. And
I think we did it once with one-time monies, and then we put it in and then we took it out, and I think it's out now.
Right. So we have, but we don't like to do it. And that's a very small amount. I'm not comfortable with not funding our capital plan. Again, for good fiscal policy, I don't think we should use one-time monies to fund operational, especially at that large of a number. And then the other thing I just want to point out while Tim's looking for that other sheet is the things on the list. I don't know if Becca, you can go up to the things on the list. Like if something makes it to the top of the capital list, we have trouble funding capital. We have for years. So when things finally make it to the capital list, they are greatly needed. It's not like these are nice to haves. And then it becomes a safety issue. These dump trucks or the van, like we need to make sure our employees are safe and they have good equipment. And that's just my 2 cents. I am not comfortable using the capital money to fund operational. That's just me.
Becca, if you can hear me, can you just try to look on the server for that too? I'm searching for it too.
Jen, you're on mute.
Oh, thanks, Donna. I was just asking if anybody had anything to say while they're looking for that document.
Yeah, I just wanted to preface, Madam Chair, that, I've been very adamant that I'm not in favor of using any type of one-time monies for our operational expenses. And I think the board generally agrees with that sentiment. I appreciate your advocacy for the capital plan and moving forward. The only thing I would just like some clarification on is that under the current budget that has had some acceptance from this board, is utilizing some sort of transfer from stabilization. If there's a number that I guess that is the board is maybe more comfortable with versus like the full 800 and what do we say, 892,782 number, then what is it? Is it only what's being recommended by the town administrator, or is there something else that we kind of feel that we think is more appropriate? I'd really that open to the board. Maybe get some direction from them.
Anybody have a response? I'll respond. I think the number depends on what still keeps us within a good bond rating place. I don't think we should use, I think we have to protect our bond rating. We're borrowing money. So that's why there's the balance. So that percentage is important. So yes, I am in favor of using some stabilization to make up the 617 because it's a rainy day fund and it's raining. It's COVID is we're trying to plan for that, but I'm not comfortable dipping into it $900,000. So that's just me.
If I may, Madam Chair, is there a number that you're totally uncomfortable with, or a number that you're more comfortable with? We understand the 900,000 might be a bridge too far for you or some of the other members. But like I said, the whole purpose of me bringing this exercise forward to this board here tonight was to see if there was some sort of middle ground that we feel can alleviate taxpayers from the burden, but also maintain the services that we are looking to cut if override doesn't pass.
While the screen's being shared, it's hard for me to see everybody. So if somebody has something, they can jump in. Otherwise, I will send it to Tim and Becca, who pulled the slide up. That hopefully helps.
Yeah, Becca, I can't see it though, but I did find the spreadsheet, so I think I can share too. I just don't know how to reopen this thing. Oh, this is the fund balance. All right, so this is, but it doesn't show the makeup of how it's made up. The sheet I have does. So let me see if I can share this screen, because I go from 7 to 2018. Let me see if I can do that. Now, somebody enable me to share the screen and I'll show you.
You should be able to share now, Tim.
Okay, I don't know. Can you see it? So down in the bottom, line 28, you have fiscal 7, and you can see 38 was the appropriation, transfers, the expenditures were 35, the encumbrances were 1.5. The detail of those numbers are not on the sheet, but this is just the unexpended balance, 2.3% in 7. Above that, 1.9. This is where the asterisk comes in relative to stimulus money. So this is town and school combined in terms of unexpended. That's this column that you want to pay attention to in terms of these numbers for what gets turned back. And then there would be a revenue one right here that showed how much revenue in excess of this appropriation right here we got. So that's what made those two things added together make what free cash is. There's some complication that they do with things that are due us, like police details. And there's a fiscal year that they come in June for the detail. They don't pay me until July. Department of Revenue does not give me credit for getting that money, even though I'll get it in a subsequent year. So detail you probably don't need to know, but I figured I would say it anyways. So you have stimulus money in these two particular pieces. And then health insurance, the savings on line 39, we saved $293,000 when we made the change to the GIC. So that's why that number is almost 3% of the total operating budget. But if you average these numbers together, it's less than 1% of the total of what's appropriated to what's turned back. So fiscal year 18, I don't have 19 on here because I for whatever reason, couldn't find that one. You have 59 in the appropriation, you have the transfers in and out, you have the total expenditures, you have the encumbrances, which a lot of that is held over for projects or school department paying in another fiscal year with the dollars they have now. It's legal to do, and that's a lot of those holdings and encumbrances are used for that. So unexpended after you do that analysis is $700,000 out of 59 million. So 1.29% of the budget from just the non-expenditure of those appropriated numbers. That's what you get. And I would argue that you get that savings because you have dedicated employees that figure out, can I do this cheaper than what's appropriated? And we can give examples of that all day long in terms of buying the streetlights, even with someone else's money. We asked the provider to sell it to us less than what they were telling us they could sell it for, and they gave it to us for that price. Small nuance to it, but every day that's what we try to approach it as a business model, to get the best product at the lowest price. And that's what turns back the lion's share of those dollars, is those management things that you do every day to manage the environment you're in. So to be within 2% of any budget, I think is, I don't know, I haven't looked it up in a textbook, but I think it's pretty good.
Tim, I would agree with you. And I think that's a really good explanation about the nuances of like how money gets turned back, because I think a lot of people don't really understand that. I think they assume it's some sort of inefficiency in the budgeting process, but really, it's no more or less inefficient than anything else in public or private practice, where you have a cost that you have to assume and model, and particularly in healthcare, where if that cost isn't realized, I think you're pretty lucky, to get that, between 1% and 3% turn back every year. I think that's pretty good.
I'll take luck over skill any day, my friend.
Yeah, same here.
But you can see that the numbers are consistent. It's not like we're randomly 7%, 10%, 1%, 0%. That's for a model, that's pretty, from 7 to now, that's pretty spot on. But anyway, so that's what that shows you. So I'll stop sharing my screen.
I mean, and the other thing is too,
I'll get them to you.
You don't want to have that percentage turn back too high, because if you do, then you're just modeling too high. So you want to get that as close to zero as possible. And it seems to be within, 0.5% or 2.5%, just about every year for the past decade, which is hard. I mean, you don't know.
So I can add 19, Peter, and send that to the board if you like.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Any other questions or on this?
I don't have a question on that, but we sort of got off on a tangent there for a little bit. But I do have questions about the contingent budget we had brought up last week. While I appreciated Tim indicating the places that he would either cut or no longer request increases for, including the town clerk and council on aging and parks and cemetery. My understanding is there still are areas here where we are seeing increases in allotments, including positions. The Board of Selectmen personnel is up 15%, town administrator is up 2%. We're looking at human resources up 55%. I know we did the human resources last week, but if we're being consistent, shouldn't those increases be still at around 2%?
Yes, and just because the line item, I need to see what line item you're looking at with the 15% increase.
I don't have it. Well, I mean, all I have is something that I have by email from you. Line 122, I think, is Board of Selectmen personnel.
So this is, Becca, you'll have to chime in relative to if the override passes, that would be one of the things we would go back and make full-time versus what it is now at 20 hours a week, correct?
No, not in our current proposal. So just to be clear, the BOS admin, the number, I apologize for my dogs. The number that we estimated in FY20, this fiscal year, was the year that we brought Joanne on board. The 21,000 was an estimate, not knowing what we were going to end up hiring that person for in terms of a $1 per hour figure. We ended up hiring her at a little bit of a higher rate, only because she had so much experience with the CPC and had a lot of background in municipal work. So we tried to keep her at the rate that she was already making for CPC. And some of her salary is offset by CPC, but not knowing exactly how many hours in a full fiscal year she's going to dedicate to CPC, we had to budget 21 as if she was going to work all of the hours only for the select board and not consider any CPC offset. So it looks like she's getting a big bump. Her salary is not going up 15%. Her rate is not going up at all in FY21. Actually, we're just trying to account for the hours and the hourly rate that she was hired for. When FY20 closes, we'll have some idea of how many hours she's worked on CPC. So we'll get, she hasn't been with us for a full year yet, but we'll get a decent understanding of what that offset will be. And so there may be an adjustment to be made there, either in October or for next fiscal year, once we can get a handle on, exactly how much CPC work she does in a year and how much that can be offset with the CPC account. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's
I guess at this point I would be looking for an acknowledgement that those hours aren't going to be available. I understand you got to do what you have to do with personnel and workload in the office, but to increase that budget right now, I think this is the place. It's a little thing, but you're looking to keep that budget line item consistent with everything else that we're doing right now. Are we still doing increases for recreation?
For the department head?
Yeah.
There'll be a 2% across the board to be on a parallel footing with the school district.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through this right now. Then we've got we talked about the HR position last week, right?
Yes.
And that was one of those penny wise, pound foolish situations?
We believe so, yes.
Okay.
Well, there's more to that one too that Becca and Tim aren't sharing, and I think it's important that people understand, because I know that, Ed, you don't like when we compare ourselves to the school side, but these employees, a lot of them do work in the same building. So one of the reasons that HR position has raised their hours was because of something the school side decided to do. And that's what they had an employee retire in January that made $95,000. They hired somebody for $65,000. And then with the savings, they gave 2 admins, data entry people in that office, $10,000 raises. So, which made those new people make more than our HR person. So, I mean, I know you like to keep things separate, but these things are all intermingled and they all work in the same building. So by keeping the municipal side, by not letting us make those people whole, but yet allowing the school district to let their people be whole, it's just, it causes this inequality and the morale, and it just.
Well, but you can see the taxpayer response, which is, how is that our problem? Are we to allow things to spiral to the point where one side gives a raise and the other side gives a raise, and then we give a raise and someone else has to compete, and pretty soon as a taxpayer you're looking at, well, we've got a Proposition 2.5 override, and you're telling me the reason I have to do this is because one side needs to be made whole with the other? These are separate positions. And as hard as it is,
and Candy makes less
as
than an admin.
hard as it is to explain to people that these are separate positions, perhaps we need to do that. Otherwise, what we can do is we can come up with a unified compensation plan, but we haven't had the political stomach to do that. I mean, I mentioned this a couple of years ago when I was on FinCom about, do we have a compensation plan? Is there a policy in place? And there isn't, because everybody likes their control over what they control. Tim likes to be able to control his departments. Jay likes to be able to control his. Okay. The downside of that is you get in a situation like we have here now, where the municipal side is chasing the school side with limited resources, and everybody's doing this. It's not me, it's you. It's not helpful. And particularly in an override year, when you have to explain to people what's going on, is that what I'm going back to people with? This?
Well, we have been prioritizing the school side of the budget as long as I can remember. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm saying at some point you have to stop putting it on the backs of the municipal employees. You're not valuing their work.
Listen, I want to be very clear. I value the work of the people in the municipal center. I want to be very clear about that. But the reality is we're asking for a taxpayer override, and doing that while at the same time even nudging towards pay increases is a really fraught suggestion to make to the community.
But Donna?
Madam Chair, if I may, okay. I think there's one thing that's critical in terms of the overall growth pattern of the community, and this is in the budget book, but I can share this as well in terms of our commitment. What I think is our overall commitment to the schools, and not pitting us against one another, but you just look at fiscal 20 in terms of the appropriation disparity. The municipal increase was negative 1.08, where the school district, because we want to support them, had an increase of $1.5 million.
Yeah, but that's only true because a lot of that stuff is mandated by the state, and because they're our biggest department. So I'm not sure
because we have an excuse doesn't mean we should.
Because we have an excuse? That's not an excuse.
We have Donna. Donna. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, I mentioned this last week. I mean, we can't nitpick. You've picked out on 3 different people right now, Ed, and small increases that there was some justification for. Last week, I said there was an agreement between the superintendent and the administrator that they would each take 0% for next year. And then the superintendent decided he wasn't going to honor that. And he also decided to give everybody on his side of the administration 2%.
But hold on, you said that. I don't mean to interrupt you, Donna, but that's not true because the school committee hasn't voted on that increase yet. So what you said last week actually wasn't true.
No, Ed, the union contract, she's not talking about that. It's about the leadership team that's not under a collective bargaining agreement. That total increase in the original budget proposed in January was $170,954.
Okay, so back up. So you're talking about the union portion of it now?
No. The leadership positions. Because knowing COVID, we needed to make reductions. We looked at salaries first. And if we zeroed everybody's increase, me, Jay, Cindy, Becca, Dan Gale, Neil Trahan, those all get 0. If we all get 0, you save $300,000.
Yeah.
So we were 129 of that 300. They were 170 of it. And that was also cutting our position in the EDC. So that's how we were initially proposing to balance the budget. When we realized that the schools didn't, they want to embrace their employees and pay them appropriately. When they were going to continue down that path, we said, well, we have to continue down that path.
Well, so see, there's where I disagree with you, because that is the tail wagging the dog right there. You can't allow a completely separate group of elected officials to dictate what we're doing on our side of the budget. That is unfair to the taxpayers. We can't just say, okay, well, because one side of the town is doing one thing, we are absolutely doing the same exact thing despite what's going on around us. That's crazy. Why would we do that?
So would your proposal to be to reduce the municipal operating budget by $129,000?
If we can.
Donna?
I'm sorry, but there was an agreement. They both, the two leaders, the school superintendent and the town administrator, agreed that there would be 0% increases. And Tim articulated that in his contract. And from what I understand, Jay said the same thing. And then he backed away from it. So the $170,000 that we're talking about could be used to keep that teaching position that they want. I mean, this is an unusual year. People all over are taking pay cuts, or the leadership is taking a percentage of their pay and giving it back towards the organization. And here is an opportunity that as I said, Jay, I would have respected Jay more if he'd done that. But I'm concerned that he decided not to, and this is just compounding the issue. It's not a tit for tat. It's just.
Guys, I have one question, Madam Chair, and a couple things that I wanted to mention that I guess are kind of rhetorical. First of all, being someone who just recently served on the school board, if you want to have a say within the school board budget, you're on the wrong committee here. Okay, first of all. The second part is, does anyone have a copy of this agreement? Was there something agreed upon? I mean, I hear from one side one thing, and I'll be honest with you guys, I hear something completely different from the other side. So I don't know who the hell to believe at this point in time. And quite frankly, if you all want to have a say in the school department budget, you want to talk about, by the way, the school committee can only really give a raise to the superintendent, not anybody else. That's per law. Then you're on the wrong committee. I just want to state that, guys. To your point about bringing up names and certain raises and so on and so forth, I think it's not a waste of time, but again, you're nitpicking to the point where we're trying to avoid, and yet we're going down the rabbit hole and everyone's kind of feeding into it. So allow me to set us straight again a little bit and get back to what the topic is and just focus on the big picture items and leave what Mr. McInerney wants to pay his employees and what Dr. Cummings wants to pay his employees to them. And then they have to answer to us at the end of the day when they ask for budget increases. But to go in there and say who gets what and who doesn't, or what agreement, I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about, because I don't know who to believe. I don't see an agreement. Everyone tells me there is no agreement, and this shit's already made up, and I'm getting sick of it.
Ed, I saw your hand up before Peter jumped in.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Overall, I want to drive home this one point, that we cannot possibly run a town government by waiting on efficiencies on our end until somebody else that we have no control over performs on their end. If there was some agreement between the municipal side and the school side about overall union or non-union raises, I wasn't party to it. This is the first I'm hearing of it, which is a problem, because now we're expected to finalize this contingent budget and send everything over to finance committee so that they can review it, so they can be prepared for town meeting that's happening on June 20th. And I'm somewhat alarmed to be a little bit in the dark, I guess, when people tell me, well, there was an arrangement between the school side and the town side. News to me. All I know is we have to provide the best service we can at the most cost-effective rate that we can. And we need to be as fair as we can to the people in the municipal building. And that needs to happen across the board. So I'm only concerned with what we can deal with here on our side. I can tell you, I couldn't possibly be less concerned with this ridiculous feud between the municipal side and the school side. Not interested. Like Peter said, you want to be in charge of the school budget, go be on school committee. You want to be a superintendent, go be a superintendent. Those people get paid what they get paid. People in the town side get paid what they get paid. And all we can afford is the money that's allotted us under Proposition 2.5, which is 2.5% plus new growth, which is why a long time ago I got started talking about this whole structural deficit that nobody wanted to believe was a real thing. It is, because you can't keep growing a municipal budget by 5.5% a year and expect to be under 2.5%. Everybody has to acknowledge that we are living in this reality. And if we have to start first, so be it. Then we have to start first. But this is where we are, and we're about to go ask people for more money than they're obligated to give during a pandemic. So I would just like an acknowledgement that we all understand this, despite what the school committee does. That's all.
Well, I will say that we have one pot of money. I grew up in New York State, in which we had two pots. The budgets were voted on separately, but we are one. And I know you keep saying it, you don't care what the school side does, but I'm telling you, municipal employees do. People are in the same building, and there's finance committee now lobbying for school committee. We have members of this board lobbying for school committee. Somebody has to stand up for the municipal employees. They deserve a fair and competitive wage as well. So I know you don't want to talk about their budget, but it's part of our budget. Their budget is within our budget. So I'm not saying how they should spend their money. I'm just saying that we have to be cognizant. If you want to take away everybody's increase on the municipal side, but to save money, to what end? To give that money we save on the municipal side to the school side so that they can provide raises to their people? It just, over time, it's just not fair. It's just not fair.
Listen, I want to be fair to them as well, but at the same time, we're not giving money to other people. We're actually asking the taxpayers to give us more money to fund these positions. And if the taxpayers say no, and I know you guys don't want to hear this, there's going to be cuts. There's going to be cuts on the school side. There's going to be cuts on the municipal side. And the fastest way to get to no is to pretend like we don't understand how to live within a budget.
We
Madam
do
Chair,
know
if I
how to
could-
live within a budget. Tim, did you have something to say?
Yeah, in terms of, I only have on the screen 14 through 20, which is just an interesting look in terms of the opportunity and the reductions in terms of the increases in the town and the school. And I think those efficiencies that Ed mentioned, I want to think that we employ those at every turn. And that's why that number can go down every year. The number goes up, but the percentage will go down, and we take less and less of the available resources to us. That's an absolute truth. That cannot continue. But the facts remain, if we were to do a zero for people that are not covered by collective bargaining agreements, there would be a savings. Again, I'm basing it on a budget that was published in January, would be a savings of $300,000. So those facts, no matter pitting people against other or not, it's still a fact. It's still $300,000. And in this slide, or this page, just, in terms of wanting to support, given the fact we only have so much under levy capacity with 2.5 and new growth, the lion's share of all those new dollars do not come to the municipality. It gets smaller and smaller over time. So we're doing everything we can to fund the school district at an acceptable level. We just don't have enough money to do it. Hence the answer for the override. But living within the budget, quite honestly, we're within 2%. We just looked at the whole sheet. That's an amazing job.
But we can't present ourselves with a false choice of either solving the override problem on the municipal side or not doing anything at all. We have to, people do this all the time where they say, well, that one thing won't solve the problem, or cutting over here won't solve the problem. It never works like that. It's always a small degree of cuts. And we see it on the school side too, where they say, well, raising athletic fees won't solve the problem. Of course it won't. Of course it won't. But you got to get yourself as close to a solution as humanly possible before you go back to the taxpayer, because that's when they say yes. That's all. And by the way, I saw in the comments, someone asked me to pick a side. I'm not picking sides. I'm not picking sides in this. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm a selectman in this town. That means we talk to everybody. We consider all the angles. So no, I emphatically reject the suggestion that there is one side or another on this. There absolutely is not.
All right. I will take a motion if there's stuff you want to reduce out of the budget then, Ed.
Well, I mean, I don't have anything in front of me except for what we were sent last week. So what are we voting on something tonight to send over to FinCom?
Well, in my opinion, we have the budget. We're set, ready to go to FinCom. You were the one that had questions about things that you didn't like that were in there. So if you want that changed, you need to make a motion to change it.
At this point, no one sent me anything about what is in there at this point, except for the slide that I just saw Tim put up before us. So how would I know?
It's been the same.
No, it changed because he sent us a slide saying that there were post-COVID reductions. Have we gotten a new budget book?
Slide
that I don't
9's
know
still
about?
the same. Slide 9's still the same as it's always been. It's just detailed out about what those increases were. So if you wanted to decrease those salaries we would cover if the override were to pass, you can take slide 9 as your jumping off point.
Slide 9. I don't have slide 9.
Oh, Becca, I'm sorry. Can you put that up? Becca, you can hear me, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, those are the things that we're already cutting, right?
Yeah, and we would look to restore them. That's where our contention came in last week in terms of that 70,000 in the letter from Mark Haddad relative to.
Okay, so these are the things that would be restored under the contingent budget.
That's correct.
Okay, so yeah, no, I probably wouldn't restore. Hold on, let me go through these. Let's talk about economic development. Tim, what's your assessment of our upside on the economic development coordinator over the past 3 years?
Yeah, it's been unique because of COVID, right? Because that outreach to those businesses and facilitating loan applications and just connectivity, and then insight and collecting data of where people are at that we can go back and share with the governor's council for the reopening. That's been good because otherwise me or Becca would have been doing those things. So we can focus on the reopening plan for the municipal center, town meeting logistics. There's a whole host of things that John does. But in terms of, minus COVID, it's just a very nice thing to have someone coordinating a project, whether it's a simple permit application for a business or hosting a meeting for those business owners to meet the state rep or other members of the EDC. There's a lot of nice to haves in there and some continuity and connective tissue from the permitting authority, i.e. ZBA, planning, and have someone on the staff trying to navigate and help them through that process. At the same time, reaching out to companies that want to locate or build in Grafton to provide them with data sheets of the sites we have available. I would do all that stuff normally, and I still kind of help with that, but John can take the ball and run with it. So there's a value there. I can't quantify it's certainly worth $30,000. I'll tell you that.
I think that's part of the issue though, is it's hard to quantify.
Yeah.
Certainly we need economic development in town, and that's part of the way we avoid going back to the taxpayers for the extra money. But if the economic development coordinator isn't actually leading to economic development in any quantifiable way, we're all people here that live in the real world and have to justify our positions in life. Is the economic development coordinator leading to economic development? Does anybody know?
I think it is. I can't tie it to a number and say our new growth was $10 million higher because we had him. There's no way to draw that analysis.
I mean, on here, finance committee assistants, $112. Assistant building inspectors, $943. Recreation directors, $710. I don't have a problem with that stuff. It's the larger stuff on there that I think is a bad look going into an override year. And honestly, I do question the economic development coordinator position. And maybe it's something as the year goes on that we have to have a more substantial discussion about, how we actually go about economic development in town. I know that John goes to the trade shows, and I know that John has been a spokesperson. I know that John has been networking. It's hard. It's hard to make that connection right now with the budget the way it is. I don't know.
You had your hand up.
Is there a motion on the table? Otherwise, I'd say we move on to the next item.
You know what, Donna? I'm actually talking about this. Thanks. Do you have anything substantive you want to add? I move that we reduce from the contingent budget, the economic development coordinator position, the principal assessor raise, the town clerk raise, the highway superintendent raise, the parks and cemetery raise, the council on aging director raise, and the library positions, if we're being consistent. And I apologize to everybody that I just mentioned. This isn't a position anyone wants to be in.
Let's do them one at a time. Can you do a motion with just one?
Do we have to?
Yes.
More painful that way.
I want to make sure everybody knows what they're
I
voting.
seconded the motion.
Oh, I didn't hear your second, sorry. All right, can you reiterate then which ones you're going to cut? Because I didn't hear all of them.
Sure. EDC, principal assessor, town clerk, highway superintendent, parks and cemetery, council on aging, and various library positions above 2%.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Now, just so you guys know, like, I can't quite see everybody, but I will hear. So if I'm not seeing any further discussion, so all in favor by roll call?
Sorry.
Doc, nay.
Carlson, yes.
I'm sorry, Peter, I didn't hear you.
Carlson, yes.
Fazio, nay.
I couldn't hear you, Ed. You're still on mute. I think you have it backwards. You're still on mute.
Frisbee, aye?
I got it there. Thomas, nay. Motion has failed. All right, anything else on the budget fiscal year 21?
One question to my fellow board members. Is there an iteration of what I just went through that would be more palatable?
Doreen?
I mean, this is an incredibly tough discussion, like we said. I would give consideration, not to the whole thing, but I may give consideration to a line item, but I'm not sure, and I'm not ready to make a motion.
I'd make a motion.
This relates, and so well, no, I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna stay on the discussion with this right now.
No,
Madam Chair,
yes.
move we eliminate the town clerk 19% raise from the contingent budget.
Do I hear a second?
I'm going to second that because I do have a question on that, Madam Chair.
Okay, motion and a second. Discussion?
Yeah, Madam
Peter?
Chair. Thank you. Mr. McInerney, can you give us the history real quick for just all of our sake about the town clerk's salary line item here for the increase to $10,510? Prior to Ms. Clark, who was serving as clerk for umpteen years, followed by then Ms. Donna Gerard, and then after her retirement, can you kind of give us a historical background of what that amount has been for the clerk's salary through those years?
Yeah, I am on mute. Sorry. No, I cannot give you what Donna made or Maureen before her. I can tell you that we looked at 20 communities similarly situated in terms of population, and we found that based on population size of ours comparative, the average salary is $76,000. And sister communities, we were missing Holliston and Bellingham, but that average was $80,126. And the abutting towns to us, the average is 75, compared to the town clerk salary today is 59. For 1 year as the interim, 3 as the clerk. So 5 total years. There's an inequity we're trying to erase. Can we erase it in a longer time frame, much like we did with the library director who was underpaid? We had her on a three-year programmatic plan. We had the rec director also in that plan. So, does it have to be 10.5? Can it be some other smaller amount, but over 2 to get her to be more competitive with her competitive sister communities? Sure.
So I guess you don't have an answer to my question. All right, I understand you did the survey about the surrounding communities. Fine, great. But we don't know what we previously budgeted for salary line item going back to when Ms. Clark was the town clerk in her last year.
I mean, we could pull up the budget sheet and look at it.
Madam Chair, and the reason for that is I just want to make sure and just kind of see where we are, because I would make a decision one way or another based on what this answer is. But to Mr. McInerney's point, I do want to point out that, if we are underfunding positions, I am a firm believer of making right for that. I believe that is creating, an unfair inequity for someone who is tasked to doing the job overall. So if we can wait for that answer, that would be fantastic.
Do you want to wait for that this evening, or do you want me to get it to
You said you were looking it up. Am I mistaken that you can't do it right now? If you want to wait, then, it kind of defeats what I'm looking for.
Donna?
I'm just not certain how relevant that is, because it would be years ago. So Maureen Clark, a number of years ago, and even Donna Gerard, a number of years ago. And we've now done the analysis of what a going rate is for a town clerk from 20 different communities. So that's what they were paid 5 years ago.
Madam Chair, with all due respect, I've been looking for that information for myself. It's relevant to me. I'm not saying it's relevant to Donna or you or Ed or Doreen for that matter, but it is relevant to me. Thank you.
Unfortunately, where we built the budget, we do a salary line total. So I have to get the breakout for the department head. I don't have that in front of me.
Doreen, did you have something while he's looking?
Yeah, just a little bit of discussion. We're on discussion, right? Yeah. So breaking down the 19% and seeing it as $10,000, and especially in a year where we're asking Candy to do an incredible amount of work setting up elections and town meeting during COVID. This is just not an item that I'm willing to take away. I think it's quantified, and I'm questioning other issues as much as I don't want to, of what can be quantified and what can't be. And I think that the town clerk, especially in the present time, my feeling is that it's well deserved.
All right. I guess we're just waiting for that one piece of info. Oh, Ed, your hand up?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could amend my motion, I think I'd like to cut to the chase on all of this. Is I want to cap all of this, all of these proposed raises at 2%. I think that's what I'm looking for. Acknowledge the hard work that people are doing, but also at the same time acknowledge the reality that we're existing in right now.
Becca, are these numbers the difference? Are these numbers the difference between 2 and 5, 2 and 3, and 2 and 6, and 2 and 19, or are they the total amount?
This is the difference between 2 and whatever is being proposed on this page.
Okay. So that motion was basically already made.
Okay, so all these positions are getting 2% raises. What I'm seeing here is the additional, for instance, 3%, 6%, 19% on top of the 2% they're already getting.
Yeah, so the percentage in the next to the number is the total percent that we're proposing.
Mm-hmm.
2% of all of these is already in the existing budget.
Okay.
It's the difference.
Never mind then.
Doreen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you to Tim or Becca, can you remind me how many hours the economic development position is?
To stay away from a benefit position, we stay under 20. I don't know, am I muted?
No, I heard you. So to
19 and a half.
19 and a half. Okay. So follow-up question to that, Madam Chair, through you. This is a position that, again, it's tough because economic development, I mean, I sit on EDC, I see the work John does, but a position that's not, that we don't have any way to quantify the work, is there, in your opinion, any leverage with the hours, the amount of time? Is there a possibility for reduction in time and still the same amount of assistance to you?
Nah, I don't know. I would have to, no, I don't think so, because as much as I don't want to say that, if I call John right now, he'd answer the phone. I don't think he's charging me for that. So there's value that's kind of intrinsic to the position and the person. So I don't know. I'll have to give it some thought. I just can't answer you right now.
Fair enough.
Tim, are we close to getting the answer to Peter's question, or?
No, the budget table as it's read lumps the whole department into one line. And I don't even know what year Maureen and Donna retired to go look at those line items, but I would have to go into the payroll system to look at the data, because we do a lump sum salary and expenses when we read it at town meeting. So I am not going to find that right now. I just don't have access to it.
So I still have a motion and a second. We're still in discussion for the motion to reduce the town clerk's salary. Any other discussion on that motion?
Madam
Peter?
Chair, just remind me again, I guess, while they're looking that up. So this 10,500 would represent a total salary line item of what for the town clerk's position?
I think it'll go to 70,000 even. If she's at 59 now, and the average, sister community is 75 and 80 respectively. So Becca, can you confirm that it goes to 69?
It's 71.
71. Okay. Hey, if we're looking to solve, I mean, and to move this along, I can talk to Candy about her position. It is elected. It's not appointed by me, as you know. But if we can institute a scale, much like I was articulating for the library and for the recreation director, and now the council and aging director, to be more competitive with their peers, why don't we do a third, and just do it over a 3-year period?
If I may, Madam Chair, I would totally be on board with that, and I would totally like to consider that. But I would like to do that for all of the employees, because I know that the new town planner came in at much less than what Joe had left previously. So what I'm trying to get at, Tim, is I don't want to see a pattern of newer people coming in and then a cut, and then a couple of years later we're bumping this back up. And I know that's probably not the case here, okay? But I want to make sure that we have a compensation plan in place, included in our budget book, that outlines that these things are what is needed to keep the people in staff here at Town Hall doing the great job that they're doing today. And I know they're selfishly doing it today, and they're committing themselves to the town. But if we don't have the compensation plan, you have to understand, we then go out and defend the budget and saying, oh, no, but you don't understand. It's been underfunded. And you know what they're going to say? Well, why the hell was it like that all these years before that? And why is it now so important today, right? So I think from our standpoint, and people who, kind of set the political tone of the town, who can be political, we can justify that compensation plan, as long as we have something in place that kind of gives us a guideline of where do we need to be funding these positions at some point in time.
Well, you got three questions I'm trying to unpack in my mind as you go through. We do have a class and comp plan that we did in 2012, and we do have categories for each employee, like the new hire for the planner. He's hired within the range, and all things considered, you just don't give someone the highest number that you can afford, which is why we had a $20,000 swing, and I was able to put those resources towards the HR person. For letting go of Joe, I had that money freed up. I wouldn't want to, get someone on a more aggressive path than they're on, because everybody's inside that range. It's 8 years old. It certainly needs to be adjusted, but it's probably after COVID goes away where you can really look at what the fallout of that is. I'm assuming there'll be less positions to be had overall.
Okay, I still have a motion and a second. We're still in discussion. Any other further discussion?
Madam Chair, I'm going to rescind my question. Maybe Tim and Becca can send that data to me later on, just for my own benefit. I don't want to hold anybody up from deciding on this tonight. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? By roll call?
Back, nay.
Fazio, nay.
Yeah, I'm going to say nay.
Thomas, nay. Okay, motion has failed. All right. Any other questions on the budget?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Oh, wait, Peter. Ed had his hand up first.
No, Peter, go ahead.
All right. So I guess the one position I want to ask the board if they would be considering is the library positions. Seeing how the library is most likely not going to open until next fiscal year, or give around that time, do you think it's wise that we fund that with the $17,500 today, knowing full well that that building's not going to be completed? Because if there's an area in here, right? If I'm understanding that what these positions are really for.
When is the library opening?
Not for another year.
Yeah, we have August of 2021.
The library is going to open in August 21.
Yeah, that's how long we have the lease for the existing home for the library.
Okay, so these positions will cover the last quarter of the year?
Yeah, probably less than that, but you gotta remember, you want to bring them in, acclimate them, train them to the operation, and then move into the building. And it's a timing issue, and the timing has changed a little bit. And the other piece of this, in terms of the funding, we got to keep the funding to keep the state aid. So there's a math equation there. Becca worked with Beth on that last week. to make sure that their budget was in line to get their percentage of state aid as well. But Becca, let's talk to Beth tomorrow. Maybe there's an opportunity to push them into fiscal 22 if it's going to be August of 21.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing on the library piece, that last line. The 17,599 is a combination of positions that Beth had proposed be allocated over 2%. So these are people that are already working in the library that have either received, the MLS library. No, that's real estate. I'm blanking on the name, but people who have received certifications or have taken on additional job duties, et cetera, people that she was proposing to give over 2%. So I just want to be clear that those people are inside that 17,599, in addition to the 2 months of those 2 new staff that we're proposing to bring on board.
So in her narrative and her budget, it has those certification adjustments that she's making for their work and service and those 2 people for the last quarter.
Okay. Any further questions? Are we all set with this tonight? Ed?
Can we move that 17.5 out of the budget for right now and then pick it up later if we absolutely had to?
You can make a motion to do that if you like.
All right, I move that we eliminate the 17,599 from the contingent budget.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Doreen?
I would prefer to have Becca and Tim talk to Beth tomorrow and just find out, what a little more clarification on that and see if that number can be reduced. I'm open to the suggestion, but I'd prefer that. I think that, Beth has done a phenomenal job as a library director and that, she should be part of the discussion before we vote on eliminating it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none by roll call?
Madam Chair,
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, Donna. I didn't see.
can you just repeat the motion?
The motion was to reduce the 17,599 from the contingent budget. By roll call.
Stock nay.
Thomas, nay.
Fazio, nay.
Carlson, aye.
Chris, yeah.
Okay, motion has been defeated, but Tim's going to talk to Beth and see if there's something some compromise that we can talk about moving forward. Any other discussion on the budget? All right, meeting minutes. We have some.
I move that we approve the minutes of May 19th as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
And Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is embarrassing. They weren't posted on the webpage for the calendar tonight under the meeting packet, nor I can't seem to find, I've been missing some emails lately from town hall. I'm a little bit concerned. The memo that was mentioned earlier that was supposedly forwarded, and now this, I don't have the meeting minutes.
They're
I'm
not
okay
in your
for-
packet?
I clicked on the link and I also looked on the webpage and imagine my surprise.
There,
So look, let's just approve them tonight. I need to clear this up. I just want to let you guys know, guys, I didn't get a copy of it. So I'm assuming you guys are fine with it, but you all should know that if you email me something, especially administratively wise, just make sure I get it, like with a text follow-up. Did you get my email, please?
okay. Donna?
It's the link that Joanne sent to all of us, and it includes the minutes at the end of it. And the memo that was referenced earlier, Tim addressed that by saying he took the same context from Chief Crapo, and Chief Crapo read it exactly the same as what is in the memo that came from Tim.
I don't know what to tell you. I don't have it.
Okay. I mean, we can table the minutes if you guys are more comfortable.
Oh, I just want to state that was part of the discussion. Let's just get approved, okay? Just a point of contention I have.
Doreen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you, Peter, are you on the link that Joanne sent for the meeting packet of May 26th?
I don't have an email from Joanne Duncan on May 26th.
No, the email didn't come on May 26th. It was the meeting packet.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you didn't receive the meeting packet?
Apparently not. I'll work on it with Mr. McInerney, his office, guys. Let's vote on this and let's wrap up tonight.
Okay. I have a motion and a second for minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Thomas, aye. The minutes are approved. Next is just a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I need one of those to be a second. Thank you. All right, all in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thomas, aye. Good night, everyone.